My name is Elizabeth Harper. I am 42 years old, divorced, and I have paid every single bill with my own hands. I bought my own house. I built my own life, brick by quiet brick, without asking anyone for help. So when my brother Daniel stood up at the Thanksgiving table, raised his glass, and called me the family disappointment in front of everyone, I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not throw my fork across the table, even though part of me wanted to. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, chest tight, listening to the laughter ripple around the room. Because I have learned something that took me years to understand. You do not have to defend yourself to people who have already decided who you are. Across the table, Daniel's girlfriend, Lauren, did not laugh. She picked up her phone. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going. Daniel has always loved an audience. Even as a kid, he knew how to work a room. He would tell a story, pause at just the right moment, and wait for everyone to lean in. By the time we were adults, that skill had sharpened into something else, something that looked like confidence but felt, up close, like a weapon. He was 2 years older than me, broader in the shoulders, louder in every room. Our parents adored him. He was the one who called every Sunday, showed up to every family event with a bottle of wine and a fresh story about his latest work success. I was the one who showed up quietly, ate my food, and went home. In their eyes, that difference said everything. Daniel thrived on the spotlight. I had simply stopped competing for it. But families fill silence with whatever story is most convenient. And Daniel had been filling mine for years. Lauren had been dating Daniel for about 8 months when that Thanksgiving happened. I had only met her twice before, once briefly at a summer barbecue and once at a birthday dinner for our mother. She seemed smart, observant, the kind of person who watches more than she talks. At the barbecue, I noticed she paid attention to how people treated waitstaff. At the birthday dinner, she noticed when our mother looked uncomfortable and quietly changed the subject. Those are small things. But small things tell you a lot about a person. So when Daniel made his toast and the table laughed, I was not surprised that Lauren did not join in. I glanced at her for just a second. She was not smiling. She was looking down at her phone, her thumb moving slowly across the screen. I looked away. I picked up my fork. But something had already shifted in the room, even if no one else felt it yet. I did not defend myself because I have learned that defending yourself at the wrong moment only gives people more ammunition. If I had stood up and listed my accomplishments, Daniel would have smiled and said I was being sensitive. My parents would have quietly agreed. Someone would have said, she always has to make everything about herself. I have played that scene out in my head enough times to know exactly how it ends. So instead I smiled. I passed the sweet potatoes. I asked my aunt about her garden. I pretended that my brother had not just held me up in front of the entire family like a cautionary tale. I have had years of practice at this. You learn, after a while, that your silence is not weakness. It is patience. And patience, when you are holding the right cards, is the most powerful thing in the world. Lauren kept glancing between me and her phone screen. Her expression was unreadable. After dinner, while everyone else moved to the living room and the football game came on, Lauren appeared at my side near the kitchen sink. She had a dish towel in her hand, and she offered to help dry. We worked quietly for a moment, the water running, the noise of the family muffled behind the wall. Then she spoke. Her voice was careful, like she was choosing each word before she let it out. Can I ask you something? She said. I told her she could. She hesitated, then asked, what did you used to do? For work, I mean. Not what do you do now? What did you used to do? I set down the glass I was holding. I looked at her. She was not mocking me. She was genuinely confused, like something was not adding up, and she was trying to find the missing piece. I told her simply and plainly. Her eyes widened. She said, that's not what he told me. My family believes I peaked years ago because I stopped correcting them. That is the simple truth of it. About 5 years back, I made a decision that looked, from the outside, like retreat. I left a high-profile position at a consulting firm, turned down a promotion, and quietly shifted into a different kind of work. I did not announce it. I did not explain it. I just did it. The work I moved into was less visible but far more meaningful to me. I worked with a small leadership organization that most people outside my industry would never have heard of. I advised companies. I spoke at private conferences. But none of that showed up in casual family conversation because I never brought it up. Daniel stepped into that silence the way he always did. He told people I had burned out, that I had given up, that his little sister, who once showed promise, had simply not been strong enough to keep up. Lauren asked me very quietly, "Does he know what you do now?" That night, back at Daniel's apartment, Lauren searched my name again. This time she was not scrolling quickly. She was reading articles from professional journals, a profile in an industry publication, a speaker biography from a leadership summit held the previous spring. My name appeared not as a cautionary tale, not as someone who had fallen short, but as someone other professionals referenced, quoted, and respected. She found a piece where a well-known figure in our field had described me as one of the most quietly influential voices in the room. She found my work listed in the acknowledgement section of a book she had heard of. She sat on the edge of the bed with Daniel asleep beside her and read every word. Then she took screenshots. Not to send to anyone. Not yet. Just because something told her she might need them later. That instinct said more about what she was already noticing in her relationship than anything she had said out loud. A few days after Thanksgiving, Lauren casually brought up my name during a conversation with Daniel. She kept her voice light. Easy. She mentioned that she had looked me up online and found some interesting things. She asked him, in the same tone you might use to ask about the weather, why he had never mentioned any of it. He laughed too fast. That is always the tell with people like Daniel. The laugh that comes before the thought, designed to dismiss what you said before you can say it again. That stuff is old, he told her. She had a moment, sure. But she didn't really go anywhere with it. Lauren nodded and said nothing more about it that night. But she had noticed the laugh. She had noticed how quickly he moved past it. She had also noticed that the work she read about was not old. The most recent article was dated 4 months ago. She filed that away and watched him more closely after that. The group text started the day after Thanksgiving and kept going for almost a week. Learn to take a joke. Daniel was just being honest. You've always been too sensitive, Elizabeth. My aunt sent a long message about how family is family and we should not hold grudges. My cousin said I should understand that Daniel's humor was just his way of showing love. I read every message and responded to none of them. At some point in your life, you realize that arguing in a group text is like trying to build a house in a flood. The water does not care about your blueprints. My brother sent one private message. It said, "Don't be so sensitive," 5 words. No apology. No acknowledgement that he had humiliated me in front of 20 people. Just an instruction about how I should feel. Lauren sent no messages at all. But she had not stopped reading. About 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Lauren called me. I was surprised to see her name on my phone. We were not close enough for casual calls. She apologized for the interruption and said she had a question she did not know how to ask politely, so she was just going to ask it. I told her to go ahead. She said she had been reading about my work, and she had noticed something. My professional background overlapped with Daniel's industry in ways she had not expected. Not as competition, we were in different lanes, but in terms of reputation and credibility. The kind of world where people knew each other, where names carried weight, where your record followed you into every room. She had figured out that my work and Daniel's work occasionally touched the same circles. She asked, carefully, whether I had ever worked with his company in any capacity. I paused before I answered. Yes, I told her. Briefly. I had been brought in 2 years earlier as an outside advisor on a project his company was running. It was a short engagement, 6 weeks, maybe 7. I had submitted a report, made some recommendations, and moved on. I had never mentioned it to Daniel. Honestly, I had not thought much about it. It was just a job. Lauren was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. Then she said, "He told me he led that project." I did not respond immediately. I let the silence sit there between us. Because I had been on that project, and I knew the names of the people who had actually led it, and Daniel's name was not among them. He had been involved, yes. But leading it was a different thing entirely. I heard Lauren exhale slowly. He described it to me in a lot of detail, she said. His version sounds very different from what the documentation shows. She had been doing more than reading articles. She had been doing real research. Lauren did not confront Daniel loudly or dramatically. That was not her way. She tested him gently, the way you press on a bruise to see how deep it goes. She brought up the project in conversation one evening, mentioned a detail she had read somewhere, and watched his face. He filled in the story confidently, adding details, expanding his role, not realizing she already knew the shape of the truth. When she asked a specific follow-up question, one that only someone with real knowledge of the project could answer correctly, he got it wrong. He covered smoothly, changed the subject, and smiled. But Lauren had already seen what she needed to see. A few nights later, she pressed a little harder, mentioned my name in connection with the project. He did not take it well. He accused her of being manipulated by me, of letting jealousy poison her view of him, of choosing his failing sister over the man who loved her. She saw the cruelty clearly then, not just toward me, toward her. That night, she packed a bag. I want to be honest about something. I did not plan any of this. There was no strategy. No quiet revenge I had been building toward for years. I simply lived my life. I did my work. I stayed out of Daniel's stories. What I understood, after decades of watching him operate, was that people like Daniel do not get caught because someone exposes them. They get caught because they overreach. They get comfortable. They start believing their own version of events so completely that they stop being careful. My silence had never been surrender. It was just patience. I was not waiting for a moment to strike. I was simply not standing in the way when the truth decided to move on its own. And the truth, when it finally starts moving, does not ask permission. It does not send a warning. It just arrives, quietly and completely, and rearranges everything. Daniel was about to overreach. I could feel it the way you feel a storm before it breaks. Daniel had been chasing a promotion at his firm for over a year. He wanted to move into a senior leadership role, the kind that came with a new title, a bigger salary, and the sort of status he had always believed he deserved. To get there, he needed the right people to believe the right things about him. So he did what he always did. He told stories. He dropped names in meetings. He referenced projects he had shaped, initiatives he had driven, relationships he had built. He mentioned, more than once, his involvement in the outside advisory project from 2 years earlier, framing it as his own leadership success. One of the names he dropped, casually and confidently, belonged to a senior figure in the field who knew me well. We had worked together on 2 separate occasions. She respected me. And someone at Daniel's firm decided, as part of the promotion review process, to verify his claims. I received a phone call on a Tuesday morning in early December. The woman on the other end introduced herself professionally, explained she was conducting some background research in connection with a professional reference, and asked if I had a few minutes. I said yes. She asked about the project from 2 years ago. She asked about the people involved, the scope of the work, the outcomes. She did not mention Daniel by name. She did not need to. I answered every question honestly. I named the people who had led the project. I described the contributions that had been made. I did not volunteer anything extra. I did not editorialize. I simply told the truth, clearly and without drama, the way I always try to. When we finished, she thanked me warmly. Her tone at the end of the call was different from her tone at the beginning. Noticeably different. I hung up and went back to my work. That was enough. I found out what happened next through Lauren, who heard pieces of it from someone still connected to Daniel's workplace. His meetings began to get shorter. The energy in the room changed when he walked in. Emails that used to come quickly started arriving late, or not at all. His manager became harder to reach. The promotion timeline that had seemed so close went quiet. Nobody told him directly. Nobody sat him down and explained what had shifted. That is how these things usually happen. Not with a confrontation, but with a slow and steady cooling, like a fire someone has stopped feeding. He felt it though. He knew something was wrong even if he could not name it. And because Daniel has always needed someone to blame for his problems, he turned in the direction he always turned. He called me, and when I did not pick up, he left a voicemail that made it very clear he had decided this was my fault. Lauren left Daniel on a Wednesday. She had been staying with a friend since packing that first bag, going back twice to collect more of her things, each time a little more certain. She told me later that it was not a single moment that ended it. It was the accumulation. Every small lie she had overlooked. Every version of a story that did not match the evidence. Every time he had spoken about me, or about anyone he saw as beneath him, with that particular kind of dismissal, smooth and casual, like cruelty was just common sense. She confronted him the final time with facts, not feelings. She laid out what she had found, what did not match, what she now understood. He did not take it calmly. He raised his voice. He called her ungrateful. He told her she had been manipulated, that she had let herself be used against him by his own sister. She did not yell back. She just picked up her bag and walked out. He lost the one person who had been willing to see the best in him. My parents called me the following week. My mother spoke first, her voice careful, like she was carrying something fragile. She said that something seemed to be wrong with Daniel, that he was not himself, that his job situation was uncertain, that Lauren had ended things suddenly and he was not handling it well. My father got on the line and said, in his steady, practical way, that they were worried and hoped I might know something. I listened to both of them completely. I did not interrupt. When they finished, I told them I was sorry Daniel was having a hard time. I said that I hoped things improved for him. And when my mother asked, gently, whether I knew anything about what had happened, I said 3 words. Ask him, Mom. There was a pause. I think that pause was the first moment either of my parents began to wonder whether they had been hearing only one side of a story for a very long time. The promotion did not come through. Daniel's firm went in a different direction, and he was quietly moved to a less visible role. He did not lose his job, but the path he had been building toward closed. His professional network, which had been growing, stalled. A couple of opportunities he had been pursuing went cold without explanation. I did not cause any of this directly, but the truth, once it starts moving through a room, touches everything. When you have built part of your reputation on borrowed credibility, on exaggerated stories, on names you have no real right to use, it only takes one careful conversation to begin unraveling it. The lies had not been dramatic. They had been quiet and persistent, layered over years. And they came apart the same way, not in a single explosion, but in a long, slow exhale. Daniel showed up at my door on a Thursday evening in January unannounced. I opened the door and looked at him. He looked tired, smaller somehow than he usually did. He had always filled a room easily, but standing on my porch in the cold evening air, he just looked like a man who had run out of road. I let him in. I made coffee. I waited. He talked for a while about how unfair things had been, how people had turned on him, how the situation at work had been mishandled. He said Lauren had been unreasonable. He said the review process had been biased. He circled around the real reason he was there for almost 20 minutes before he finally landed on it. He said he needed help. A recommendation, a phone call, a word put in with someone who might be able to open a door for him. He framed it as something I owed him, because family means you show up for each other. He did not apologize. He did not mention Thanksgiving. He just asked. And I said no. He stared at me. I do not think he had genuinely considered that I might say no. In his version of our family, I was the lesser one, the one who needed grace, who needed to be tolerated. The idea that I might be the one holding a door he needed opened, and choosing to keep it closed, did not fit the story he had been telling. I did not say it with anger. I kept my voice calm and even. I told him, I didn't do this to you, Daniel. I just stopped protecting you from yourself. I stopped agreeing with your version of me so that you could feel bigger. And I stopped covering for the way you've treated me for years. He said I was being dramatic. I said I was being honest. He left angry, footsteps heavy down the porch steps. My neighbor's porch light came on across the street. I closed my door and stood in the quiet of my own house and breathed. Lauren messaged me about 3 weeks later. It was a long message, thoughtful and carefully written, the kind you draft more than once before you send it. She thanked me for how I had handled the night she cornered me in the kitchen. She said she had expected bitterness, or at least some satisfaction, and instead I had just been honest and calm. She said watching the way I carried myself, without apology and without performance, had taught her something she had needed to learn about what real confidence looked like. At the end of the message, she mentioned something she had found during her research. Something Daniel had said about me years before Lauren even knew him. A comment he had made in a professional context to someone she had since spoken with. He had actively discouraged people from working with me. Deliberately. Not once, but more than once over a period of several years. That revelation settled over me slowly, the way cold water does. I sat with it for a long time. Because suddenly, certain things that had puzzled me over the years began to make sense. Opportunities that had gone quiet unexpectedly. Introductions that had never materialized. A sense occasionally that a door had been closed before I even reached it. I had always chalked those things up to timing, to chance, to the ordinary friction of a career. But Daniel had been working against me privately while performing brotherhood publicly. He had needed me to be small. He had made sure to protect that smallness wherever he could. And I had sat across from him at every holiday table, passed him the bread, asked about his job, and never known. Here is what I decided sitting with that truth. I was not going to let it make me bitter. I was going to let it make me free. Some chains are lighter when you can finally see them. The following Thanksgiving was different. The table was smaller. Some people had made other plans. My aunt was visiting her daughter out of state. A couple of cousins had started their own traditions. Daniel was not there. He and my parents were in a difficult stretch. Not broken, but strained. The way things get when truth rearranges a family's furniture, and nobody is quite sure where to sit yet. I brought sweet potato pie because it is my mother's favorite. I helped set the table. We ate without speeches, without toasts, without anyone performing for anyone else. It was quieter than any Thanksgiving I could remember. And I found that the quiet felt like relief. I helped my mother with the dishes after dinner. We talked about small things, her garden, a book she was reading, the neighbor's new dog. And then she set down the dish she was drying and looked at me. She picked up her glass of water from the counter, and she raised it. It was not dramatic. It was not a speech. It was just my mother in her kitchen, looking at me the way I had always hoped she might. She said, to Elizabeth, for her patience, for her grace, for her strength. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were full. I did not cry, though I wanted to. I raised my glass and touched it to hers, and we stood there for a moment in the kitchen that smelled like pie and dish soap and old wood. Daniel was not there. And I realized, standing in that quiet room with my mother's eyes on mine, that I had never actually needed him to see me. I had only needed to stop letting his version of me take up space in my own head. The best revenge was never proving him wrong. It was watching him prove himself, while I got on with the extraordinary business of my own quiet, powerful life.